terms of what the Triangle Fire meant and means.
Well, without further ado, allow me to introduce our panel. We just heard from Joel Sosinsky, who is the co-author of New York City Triangle Factory Fire, along with Andi Sosin. I'm Cassandra from BAAD, and to my right, I have, yes, Andi Lancelotti, and I have Andi is a cultural worker, artist extraordinaire, and we'll...
Bronx born.
All right, a Bronx badass woman, obviously.
You heard how the Bronx girl survived jumping.
Ed Vargas with Workers United, formerly the International Ladies Garment Workers Union. Sherry Kane, also with Workers United. And Rose Imperato, who's also a cultural worker. And all of this impressive lineup is part of the Remember the Triangle Fire Coalition. And I didn't know whether to wear my cunt t-shirt, and I'll give you a cunt catechism in a second, or my yoga t-shirt, because one of the purposes of yoga is a consciousness of origins, and I feel that we're very much celebrating that this evening. So, Joel was telling us about different takes on this historic event. The last show that I curated in the Bad Eyes Gallery was called Witch Hunt from Salem to Guantanamo, exploring the persecution of difference and dissent as a continuum and metaphor for this country's history. And I can't help but being reminded of the burning of witches. I mean, there's something analogous here too, just
I'm not so sure about that, because this was an accident. This was a tragic accident that could have been avoided had the owners been, first of all, had there been regulations and had those regulations been enforced about the sizes of the stairwells, about not locking the workers in, about having sprinkler systems which were available. But the boss's children and the bosses were in the building at the time. And even though there were fires that were encouraged essentially by the lax regulations and the ability to collect on insurance, so that at the end of the season the owners could get rid of the overstock, those fires took place when nobody was in the building. This time they paid high premiums because they had had fires before, but they really did not need to have a fire when, this was really truly an accident. It was an accident waiting to happen, and the fire commissioner, there had been a fire in Newark very recently before that, and the fire commissioner had actually warned that there would be a large fire in a garment factory in New York. And the Manufacturers Association, which was led by the owners of the Triangle, were contesting this fire commissioner's attempt at regulating. So there was a lot of this contentiousness going back and forth, and they were saying that there should be no abridgment of their ability to do business, and they were not interested in putting in sprinklers because they could buy high fire insurance. But this was not a purposeful fire.
Okay, I was struck though when Cassandra said that, Andi, about the women burning, because you all probably heard when Samuel Gomper said it took women burning for change to happen, and why is that? Why did it take that kind of tragedy? I mean, we could all see, the workers could see, the owners could see that things were not going right. Things were not safe in these environments. So why did it take that? I mean, I think that might have been what hit you, because that hit me when he said that it took women burning or burning.
There's also a Yiddish song about the fire that Andi sent me called Die Korbuns.
Fire Korbunas. which means burnt offerings, okay, the victims
So
of
you're hitting on
fire.
something.
Well, and obviously, it's a fascinating question. If systematic injustice is not an intent to hurt people and keep them down and cut their lives short. So many questions come up seeing this film. We're celebrating the Badass Women Festival because March is Women's History Month, and Women's History Month exists because of March 8th. What's March 8th?
My birthday.
It's also International Women's Day, and my understanding, and the historians and union leaders and artists will correct me if I'm wrong, I do hope, and our beloved BAAD public, but my understanding is that the German socialist Clara Zetkin proposed that International Women's Day be created in honor of the strike of the 20,000 garment workers. The strike that unfortunately failed to get a union into the shop where these women were working. So that's an important little historical fact. Unionists, tell me, has anything changed? Are immigrant women in this country still laboring in unsafe sweatshops?
But I think that you just hit it on the head, that immigrant workers are constantly being chosen to be taken advantage of because of the fact that the laws don't usually work in their favor. If they're undocumented workers, then they're easy to be exploited because there's no place for where they can go. They can't necessarily go to the police because then they're going to get arrested, and then what happens? So if it wasn't for the union who represents workers regardless of what their background is or their legal conditions, that then they will not be represented at all. And it's our position that we represent workers no matter if they're working, then they need to be respected in the workplace. And so that the voice of the union is the voice to speak for those who can't speak for themselves. And what we see today is those institutions and organizations similar to those that were happening at the turn of the century to try to shut us up and to make it so difficult for us to be able to speak for those, not only those who are in unions, but also those who don't have unions, but are working in workplaces that are what we consider to be modern sweatshops. What we have to look at the Triangle Fire is that we have to understand that that was a modern sweatshop. And what we consider to be a modern sweatshop is one that is not able to be photographed. It's not dingy. It's a modern sweatshop because you have bright lights and brand new machines and everything that you need to make the production possible. But what you don't have is overtime pay. What you don't have is pensions. What you don't have is vacations. What you don't have is those rights in order to raise a family under decent conditions. Those things are taken from you. That is a sweatshop, but you cannot necessarily get it on camera.
Yesterday, I was interpreting at a union meeting. The workers of Boathouse Restaurant in Central Park are trying to unionize. And I was appalled because even though the rank and file is people of color and women, the only people who spoke at this meeting were union leaders, and they all turned out to be white men. Sherry, is sexism and classism still a problem in unionizing in this country?
Well, it's reflective of society, so yes, of course it is. I mean, part of the thing is why did the uprising of the 20,000 start? Because Clara Lemlich stood up and she said, it's
Fuck
time
this.
it's time, I have something to say. She basically said, I have something to say, we're going on strike. And essentially, if there are problems in your union, we would say it's a democratic institution, you need to get rid of that leadership and, come up from the rank and file.
What does Wisconsin have to do
I was
with
just
this?
gonna ask.
Yes,
I was just
please.
gonna ask, you asked the question, how have things changed now? And I immediately thought about what's going on in Wisconsin, or what happened just recently in Wisconsin. How is that affecting everything else that is happening now with unions?